Catholic Echo Podcast is a weekly podcast discussing what's happening now in the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Bishop David Bonner and members of our diocesan community discuss your burning spiritual questions. The Catholic Echo Podcast is produced by the Communications Department of the Diocese of Youngstown with support from the Annual Diocesan Appeal. It can be found on catholicecho.org, Facebook, and YouTube. Your host is Collin Vogt.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Echo Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Vogt, and today I am joined by our Diocesan Director of Music, Mr. Ralph Holtzhauser. Ralph, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, Collin.
So our last piece today is a very special one as well. This is the Missa Solenile. So this, Ralph, you played this at the Chrism Mass, correct?
Well, you know, it's funny because I actually didn't play it. I just directed it, which is wonderful.
Oh, right, okay.
And this piece is rather interesting. If we're talking about the Chrism Mass, I had about 40 singers upstairs singing this, and it's actually a two-organ part. And we can get into that in just a little bit after we listen to a selection.
Yeah.
And so my organist, Bob McMurray, was doing a fantastic job of getting both parts and making sure it was being done very well. And, you know, the choir sang wonderfully.
So give us a little bit about the history of this piece and what interests you about that.
Oh, gosh. Well,
you'll know it speaks for itself when you listen to it.
Yes, yes. It's a big piece. And it's just based off of composers in all of history, really, have just taken parts of the Catholic Mass. And some of these actually are performed in Masses, some of them more for performances. And this was actually more for performance than it was for an actual Mass.
Right. Okay.
Even though it mimics the actual Mass parts. So like the Kyrie, you know, the Gloria, etc., etc., etc. So this was actually created by Louis Vierne. He's a prolific organ composer, but also he wrote some choral works as well. And so he originally wrote this for two organs. And so since we are still in the Paris and France region, Vierne was the organist at Notre Dame at the time.
Right.
And he took this and wrote this for Widor, who is another huge, you know, organist and composer at Saint-Sulpice. So they're not too far away from each other in France. You can walk there to each one in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
And so in these big churches, so more history for you, there's two organs. So there's a choir organ, which is generally downstairs, and either has its own organ or controls part of the large organ, and then the grand organ, which is a little bit wild. I mean, some of those are really quite stunning and fantastic. And so because some of these places are so big, it only makes sense to have your choir up front, have the choir organ, and then have just the big organ in the back. So there's actually dialogue between these two organs in this piece of music, and then, of course, for huge choir.
So this might be a stupid question for me, but with some of these organs, because I was going to ask you, where do you even have two organs in the same church? But, of course, Notre Dame, I guess, would be one.
Oh, well, most of the really big ones around there. So Saint Eustache, which I've played at, that's the largest organ in Paris in terms of, like, ranks. You have Notre Dame, Saint Clotilde, Saint-Sulpice, which is where this piece premiered, which is the largest cavaille. It's like 7 stories tall. It's a crazy...
What is that?
It's a church that has, like, the largest cavaille instrument of all
what
time.
Is that?
That's the organ builder. So, so he was the one who made all the advancements at that time. And that's another organ history lesson for you as well. But I mean, all these churches have this. But there are also churches in the U.S. Generally not as many Catholic churches, but a lot of Episcopal churches might, you know.
Oh, interesting.
Trinity Cathedral in Cleveland, which I played at many times, has two, you know. Fairmount Presbyterian Church in Cleveland. So those are my stomping grounds. I can say these things, you know.
Ralph and I actually have the same home parish.
Oh, yes, it's true. Yes,
St. Christopher's and Rocky River.
Yes.
That's another conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
So these organs are custom built for these churches.
That's something to take note of, because the most important stop on the organ isn't the organ, it's actually the space.
Yeah.
Because it is built for the space. So whenever Granny says, the organ's too loud, well, guess what? It was actually built for the space, you know? So
your ears are too small.
Yes.
All right, so let's play a selection from the Missa Solenile. that was Kyrie eleison from the Missa Solenile.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, it speaks for itself pretty much.
Yeah.
That is just an amazing piece right there. And I would encourage you, when we're done with the episode, to go listen to the whole thing, because I think it really is completed with all the other movements. It's about 25 minutes.
Oh, yes.
That introduction is then kind of fleshed out in some ways, or it's reflected on it, you could say, in a way
absolutely.
that really adds even more to it. But that piece is just shocking when you hear it.
It definitely is a wake-up call, that's for sure.
Yeah. The idea or the phrase that's sticking out in my mind listening to it is fear of God.
Oh, yes.
Like, it really touches into that terrifying nature of this God that we can't fully know, and the mystery. And, like, it reminds me of, like, I can never fully know you. And that is kind of a haunting thought. But it's balanced out with this almost childlike, maybe I should say, very angelic, like, plea or appeal almost to it.
Exactly. Well, what's the text of Kyrie eleison mean?
Yeah, I know it. Now you're putting me on the spot.
I am putting you on the spot, because we say it all the time in Mass, right?
Yeah.
Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy.
Yeah,
Christ
exactly,
have mercy,
yeah.
right? I mean, that plea is exactly what is happening.
Yeah.
And when you are in this key, it's minor. It's and for listeners who don't really know anything about music, just think sad. Or think like a darker thought. It is very pleading in that nature. And it just keeps on repeating itself. The text is not really changing the whole time,
Yeah.
It's
not a hippie Jesus song
No.
there.
It's very serious.
Lord Jesus.
Solemn Mass. So,
Yeah. So there was a little bit that we were kind of talking about going on in there with the two organs. What does that add to it? What does that bring to it, having these two pieces that's written for two?
Well, first of all, if you were in a space like that where you were lucky enough to hear something like that, it's a sonic, really, experience. I mean, it's hard to describe almost. So if you were, like, sitting in the middle, you would be caught in the middle between... Well, it's not really being blasted. It's also hard to describe, because these churches are way larger than, like, basically most churches in the U.S. So, like, the sound is coming from so high, it has to be a big sound to even reach the front,
Right.
And so when you're in Notre Dame, I mean, the anchemades, the big kind of horizontal pipes, bam, they blast you, really. And it could be metaphorical. It could be the call from God to us, back and forth, because the big organ could be God, and, the smaller one, and plus the choir could be us, saying, Lord, have mercy. It is a beautiful thing. And, when you're lucky enough to hear that in person live, you can feel the dialogue and the push and pull of the space as well. So,
Yes. I wanted to ask you about, I feel in that piece that there's a dissidence between the sound of the choir and what's happening on the organ. Not the whole time. There are parts when it kind of works together, but it almost feels like they're opposed. Do you pick up on that?
Well, I think there is dissonance. And basically what the choir organ is doing is they're playing the choir parts as well. There's a lot of moving, like, inner voices. To the listener, there's soprano, alto, tenor, and bass parts. And so in between the soprano and bass, which are your top and bottom parts respectively, there's a lot of movement happening, which is allowing for that tension to really make sense. And on top of that, the organ is sometimes doing something to kind of push and pull in that, like, kind of dark way. It's really cool. Really incredible piece, especially written by a blind organist of all things.
Wow. That's amazing. And, that's why I'm kind of saying, like, I'd encourage anyone listening to this to go and listen to the whole thing, because then I feel like it's then balanced out. Like, when you talk about the Kyrie being very pleading, because we're standing before the judge, of all, and he knows everything about us, and that is very imposing and frightening. But then I feel that dissonance there is kind of contributing to that feeling. But then in the next movements, those two things become harmonious.
Exactly. They transform a lot, and there's a lot of great soaring moments, too, where it's very uplifting in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I feel like it completes that fleeting feeling of what is God. When you first kind of come to that and you go, wow, and you start to understand and you start to think about the grandiosity of God. I remember when I was a kid, after you get past your, like, first, like, I'm in church and I'm drawing in a coloring book, but when you're in school and everything, and then you kind of go, I was always terrified of the concept of heaven lasting forever. I'm like, that's scary. It's so unknowable.
Well, it's you can't really conceive of that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's that fear of God, and then learning to trust in God. So I think that there's so much power in this whole piece, and, we can't play the whole thing, obviously. But I also wanted to say it really highlights the versatility of the organ.
Yes.
That power and that dissonance and the way that it plays off the choir, but then it also can be incredibly gentle as well.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh, and just gorgeous in terms of texture.
Yeah, it's such a versatile instrument. And it's interesting because, as you say, it's kind of like you can't modulate the dynamics based on how you're playing it, but you have all these like elements to it. Mm-hmm. But, I think people tend to think of it maybe as more like one note in a sense that it's just this very like powerful thing. I think that piece really highlights how much you can do with it.
Absolutely. It's also kind of like if you want to relate it to something more relatable, I should say. Like if you're in Mass and or if you go to like another church and you hear an organist, or you hear like somebody who like really is putting lots of different things in there to make the music soar, you really know.
Yeah.
There's a reason it's the, official instrument of the church,
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about a lot of organ and choral music, which is just, which makes sense, especially in the church and the cathedral. But, I think there's a lot of power there, and there's a lot of room for education. And how can we get away from the, well, this is too loud, to like, oh, actually, they're doing something to color that hymn a little bit better.
Yeah.
Or like, this is actually enhancing the prayer of the hymn, which is huge in the church.
Yeah. And I feel that piece especially, and obviously it's longer, and that's kind of why it has this characteristic to it, but I feel like it has strong narrative theme. This journey through struggle and strife and uncertainty and fear. And then as the piece is built on in the later movements, it really highlights that nature of the journey of faith as well. So I thought that was just a wonderful piece, and I thank you for introducing it to me.
Oh, absolutely.
I really, really love it. So once again, I would encourage anyone to go listen to the full thing as well. And with that, we are unfortunately having to conclude our episode. This was a wonderful time. I hope that anyone listening really got something out of some of the music that you might hear at church, and treat it as an invitation to come to these concerts that we have here at Saint Columba Cathedral, because Ralph will be there.
Yes.
And he will introduce you to some amazing music as well.
Thank you. And also come to like the diocesan events. We do our best to enhance the worship where we can, and especially at those big diocesan events, that's where you can really, I always say, you can have a little bit more fun, but you can really beef things up a lot more, and it really just is gorgeous. You know?
When are some events coming up that people might be able to look out for?
So our concert season is over officially in June. So usually during the summer, there's really not too much going on, but usually all of the concerts are going to be broadcast, on the website. I have some great things in store for this upcoming year. I mean, I have a lot of international organists who want to come and play, budget depending, but I also want to talk to local people. It really needs to be the full picture so we can support here and then also bring in just to get more people.
No, I think what you're doing is a great thing for us, because it's making Youngstown a hub for this great music.
We need this.
And,
we need this.
It's a wonderful thing. So thank you, Ralph. Thank you for being
Absolutely.
here today. And thank you for
so
all you
much,
do
Collin.
for the diocese.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Catholic Echo Podcast. To keep up to date with our episodes and for more information from the Catholic Echo, go to catholicecho.org.
The Catholic Echo Podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Have a blessed day, and may God be with you.